It's episode 8, breaking down the basics. This is the long form content for electrical classification. Main thing we want to cover here in the long form is class determination. That includes then division determination, zone determination, and group determination. Where we're getting this from is NFPA 70. It's a National Electric Code. It's going to be Articles 500 to 504. That's where all this comes into play. The important points are Class 1 is going to be flammable gases and vapors. Class 2 areas are going to be combustible dust, and Class 3 areas are going to be ignitable fibers. I really want to break this down into within the classes. Then how do you know which division you're in? How do you know which zone you're in? We'll also talk about with OSHA and NEC details different groups because the OSHA standard says that all equipment needs to have the class, the group, and the temperature and pressure information on it, especially temperature code information for our ECs here. So we'll go into greater detail on that with a longer example where we really break down all those sections so you know how to determine your classification for your area. Again, briefly here, just wanted to show you a graphic of the different classes that you can find, different classes, divisions, zones for these areas. That'll kind of tell you the different hazards and the mitigations that you need to take place for these electrical classification areas. As I mentioned, all this information can be found in NFPA 70 in conjunction with NEC, OSHA 1910.399. It can be easily found online or in the standard. As you can see here, this first graphic, we have Class 1 locations. This deals with flammable gases or vapors. Below that, it tells you the designation between Div 1 and Div 2. As you can see, the next graphic here is showing you the different zones and zone systems and what stipulations make each zone, Zone 0, Zone 1, and Zone 2. Moving through here, we have Class 2 locations. These deals with combustible dust rather than gases or liquids. And so then you have the classifications. Within that, you have the divisions, Division 1 and Divisions 2, and those stipulations there for combustible dust. And Class 3 are consisting of ignitable fibers, and you've got the Div 1 and Div 2. So it's a good resource here, looking at these to kind of determine if you're trying to determine the class of your area, if you've never done electrical classification before, you can take a look at this. You can determine which class it is, and based on these stipulations below, what division it is. Lastly, you can see this graphic here. This is a table kind of comparing them. So if you're dealing with the hazardous material, gases, or vapors, it's showing you the different divisions within the class and different zone systems. Also, the frequency of occurrence is what's kind of playing into some of this classification. And it shows that here in the chart. So this information is very good if you're setting it up initially, or if you have a new system being put in or some new work being done that hadn't been done before. You can reference these to kind of when you're doing your siting to kind of see where your risk mitigation needs to be. Now that we've determined what electrical classification that we have for our area and for our units, we want to talk about, number one, what devices do we want to use there? Okay, so it's something that maybe we don't think about all the time. We think about spark tools, ignitable things, hand tools that we're going to be using in the area. We think about the equipment. We want to make sure that those things are rated for our class and our division, but also intrinsically safe data devices and equipment devices is something maybe we don't think about quite as much. One thing could be any type of iPads or tablets that our operation personnel use in the field to document their rounds need to be intrinsically safe and rated for the class and division that we're talking about. So this is super easy because a lot of times when you buy these devices, they're specifically made for this, and they list that they are rated for that, or sometimes they make cases for your devices that then can be rated for that. We don't just want to walk out there with our run-of-the-mill iPad when we have a flammable atmosphere here, we're in an electrical classification zone, and just start documenting our stuff that way. We want to make sure the device we have is adequate. That includes any electrical equipment we have for forklifts, pallet jacks, just anything that we're moving equipment around in terms of totes or drums or crates. And we need to make sure that that stuff is rated as well for our electrical classification. Also with the electrical classification there, we want to talk about what are our procedures for housekeeping there. That's going to help prevent, especially in combustible dust situations, class 2, what devices we can use. We need to partner that with our operations for housekeeping. And lastly, in terms of devices, our phones are a major piece. We don't think about it a lot because our phones are always in our pockets. We're always using our phones throughout the day. The smartest bet is really, if you're going into an electrically classified area, you can get a case for your phone. Maybe there's some phones that are just, you can use there. It's justified that you can use them there based on their design. But really, probably the safest bet is leave your phone in your office. It can be an ignition source. People don't think about that a lot. And additionally, with that, you want to make sure that you're thinking about that for your contract personnel as well. A lot of plants have a procedure in place that just says, contact personnel, leave your phones in your trucks. If you don't have that sort of thing, you want to make sure that they understand they need to keep those devices in designated areas and why they need to do that. So in terms of designated areas, what else can we use our electrical classifications for? We should be putting these classifications overlaid on a plot plan of our site. That's the best way for people to be able to use this. Then what that can be used for is also for our access points. That's talking about vehicular access, our smoke break areas, the access of personnel there, and also access just to our general personnel and contractors. Maybe we have an outage, maybe we have a break station. We want to make sure that all those things are cited based on our electrical classification. For vehicle access, this can include chains, gate arms, those kind of systems, restricting access of vehicles. That's a main thing. Obviously, we have to drive down some areas. We just need to make sure that we don't have high traffic areas in electrically classified areas where we could have our vehicle as an ignition source. This once again includes our golf carts, our pallet jacks, our forklifts, anything like that. That is included in vehicular access that we mentioned earlier. We could also implement curbing and bollards to kind of help us with that access as well. In terms of contractor tents, smoking areas, smoking we normally think of because it's a readily ignition source. A lot of times we make sure that we place those outside of EC areas. Let's make sure we keep doing that. As far as our contractor tents, we think about them as being temporary, but just because that unit's down, we need to make sure that another unit's electrical classification doesn't overlap into that area. We really need to be conscious of where we're citing personnel and contractors because, to be honest, we don't have as much control over those personnel as we would our own personnel. We really have to be great up front with our training for our contractors and those sort of things. So in conjunction with that, let's make sure that we cite those areas away from an area that's going to be dangerous or going to be an electrically classified area. So all these things kind of symbiotically work together to make sure we're not creating a spark, we're not creating an ignition, and that creates a large explosion or flash fire at our facility. Here you can see just put together a rough little plot plan graphic if you're doing electrical classification. So pardon my drawing here, drawing skills, but basically that's showing the different hash types and different marks are showing the different classifications and different zones on the map, and you can see the equipment we're designating there and saying, okay, this equipment is this electrical classification. If we were doing a turnaround, we've got a little X here saying our tent location. We want to make sure, obviously, we're outside of that classifications. If this classification is going across a roadway, like we see when we're looking at our sighting issues, as you can see with the green line there, we may want to restrict access to our vehicles and our personnel. And so this is key to do on all of your plot plan drawings for your site, to use them with your electrical classification to determine, are you siting things correctly and are your accesses correctly? This also plays into what we talked about with devices What types of devices are you using in these areas? What types of instrumentation and utility stations are in these areas? So if you do this exercise, this can really help you figure out if all of these things are cited properly. Hope you like the content. As always, you can check us out on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, or at our website.